Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of this Introduction to Cinema 4D. We are going to be covering some basic modeling techniques with this next video, and I really want to encourage you to think about other objects that you could create using these same steps. Now, I do want you to recreate this with me, but at the end of it, I also want you to look around your apartment, your room, your house, and I want you to look at some of the objects that you could recreate following these same techniques and maybe build something really quick and just post it on the comments so that we can all take a look at it and we can all kind of help each other along. So with that said, we're going to recreate a small wooden box that is sitting to the left of me. I can see it pretty well from where I'm sitting, so I'm not going to bring it over. Um, and we're just going to use some very basic techniques. We're going to go up to our primitive menu and we're going to use a cylinder. It's a cylindrical wooden box. So I'm just going to take this cylinder, go to the attributes over here, and start changing some of these things to match the proportions of the shape. So what you see me doing right now is under the height, I'm just reducing the height to kind of match the shape, the basic shape silhouette of the box. And I'm going to leave the radius at 50, the height at 60. As you can see here, we're working in centimeters. And right now, the numbers don't really matter for what we're recreating. We can always scale things up, scale things down as we see fit, but it's important to just get the right proportions more so than it is to get the right measurements. Now, I could get the box and I could go get a measuring tape and I could measure it and get the exact same numbers that I need to recreate it. I'm not going to do that for this particular case, but if you feel that that would help you model your object in your apartment or house, then I would recommend it. It actually is very helpful to know the measurements and kind of get started that way. So this cylinder, some of the things that we need to take a look at really quick. I'm just going to go up here to these rendering buttons and I'm going to hit the first one, which is for a quick render. You'll see that I have something that's not very exciting. It's a gray, very sharp-edged cylinder. Now, very few things in life have a perfect 90-degree edge. Unless it's laser cut, and even still, with wear and tear, it eventually starts to dull out. So we'll address that towards the latter part of the video. For now, I want you to take this video, get the height and the radius approximately where you need it to be. The height segments we can leave at 1, but I'll turn on garage shading with lines up here in the display menu. And if you take a look at this height segments, we can add the number of segments in Y. But for this particular model, we're going to leave it at 1. The rotation segments are, as you would imagine, the rotations around the radius. Because it's a cylinder, you can almost picture these as cuts in a cake. So here we have rotation segments of 3, and that would give us a triangular shape. And you can keep adding more and more as you go up, and you get more definition. Now, by default, this is set to 36, which is fine, but I want some really, really sharp close-ups of this object, so I'm going to bump it up to 72. Now, if you had a lot of objects in your scene, you probably wouldn't want to go up to 72. Once you start seeing the lines kind of converge and create this really dense section, you really start to tax the rendering or your graphics card and your processor on your machine quite a bit. So you want to try to avoid this type of concentration of lines. But in this particular case, it's one object. It shouldn't really affect us that much. So we're going to bump it up to 72. Now, the next step is to make it editable. You can either hit the letter C on your keyboard once you have it selected, or you can go to this button and just click it once. You'll see immediately that the symbol next to cylinder changes to this 3-point polygon. If I hit undo, we go back to this cylinder shape, which is what it is. But as soon as you make it editable, it becomes an editable polygon, which shows you the points, the edges, and just one really basic shape. What it's telling you is that you can now use these tools here, the point, the line mode, and the plane mode, to select different parts of your object. If you have the plane mode, you see that each one of these highlighted bits are the parts that I can select. Now, one problem with when you make something editable is that all of these faces or all of these main sections of your object are now disconnected. And we don't want that. We want this to act as one, as it was doing before. So I'm going to use the point mode, select a couple of the points, hit Command A to select all, and then I'm going to go up to Mesh, Commands, and Optimize. And what that's done is that it's connected all of those points, and it now acts as one. So that's a very important step to do. Make sure that you, after you make something editable, that you either optimize all the points so that it merges all those different faces or parts of the object together, or there's a couple of other ways to do it. You can use a connect object, and then you can throw your object in a connect object and make the connect object editable. That's another way of doing it. This is the faster, I think, cleaner way of doing this, so this is what I would recommend you do. For now, if you have all these faces selected, the top that is, you can do it one of two ways. You can either use the live selection tool and just kind of drag around and make sure that you select all. I'm going to show you another shortcut which is really helpful. It'll help speed things up quite a bit. If you have nothing selected, and you can either go up to the select tool and go to loop selection, or you can hit the letters UL in succession, and you'll see that it now highlights the entire ring, or the entire top of all the faces. So you can just click once and you get all of those faces selected. So now that we have all those selected, I'm going to introduce you to the Extrude Inner tool. And that's up here in Mesh, Create Tool, Extrude Inner. We're going to be using Extrude Inner, Extrude, and Bevel for the rest of this modeling exercise. So I'll also go over the shortcuts, but if you need to, you can always come up here and find them in the Mesh and Create tools. So, whoops. So I select my faces, I hit the letters the letter I. No, not UI. UI inverts your selection. I gets you the Extrude Inner. And you'll see the little symbol for the Extrude Inner following my cursor around. That means that when I click and drag now, I can extrude my faces inward. And that's what I want. You can also go over to the offset and type in exactly what you want it to offset, or how much you want it to offset. So let's just do an even 2.5, and I'm going to hit the tab key just to jump out of that. And now this is offset 2.5 centimeters. I can now hit the letter D, which will get me the extrude tool, and I can click and drag to the left to extrude down, or click and drag to the right to extrude up. In this case, because we're making a box, we want to extrude to the left. And I'm going to keep going until right before I pass the bottom of the cylinder. So I want to leave it right around there. And that creates the hollowed out area of the box. So that's perfect. That's what we need. Now, as I said before, very few things in life have a sharp 90-degree edge. So this 90-degree edge here doesn't really work for me. I want to change that. So I want to switch over to the line tool, use the loop selection tool again, UL, or under Mesh, Create Tools. Select. You'll find the loop selection, and I want to select that line, and I want to also select that line, and I might as well do the bottom line. So we've got our three edges selected, and now I'm going to hit the letters MS, or you can go to Mesh, Create Tools, Bevel. And what the Bevel tool does is it creates edges, or rounds out edges, I should say. If we come over to some of the options here, you can change the type from linear to convex, concave, Bezier, or a user-defined preset. For now, we're going to use convex, and that's going to give us a rounded edge. But before it gives us a rounded edge, we need to add some subdivisions so that it actually has more geometry to work with. So now that we've got our three subdivisions and convex, we can click and drag and see a more rounded out edge. And that's exactly what we need, so that when the light hits this, it'll reflect a little more naturally. So I'm just going to do an even 0.5 centimeters, and I'm going to hit apply. And now if we do a quick render, you'll see this edge catches light differently than it did before. Before, it was just one flat object, another flat object, or surface, I should say. And now it's rounded out and it catches light a little more naturally. So that's what we want. That looks a lot better now. So let's go ahead and select the bottom and just extrude it in a little and make it look the way the actual model looks. We'll probably never see this bottom, but you never know. Maybe you want to create a scene where a kid knocked it over. Um, I don't know. So let's just extrude in a little, and I hit the letter I, excuse me, and then the letter D to create an extrude. I don't want to pass the other one. I just want to go in right before I pass that face. And it's just to create this little edge. Okay, so if we hit Command R or hit the quick render button, excuse me, then we can see where we are so far, and that's great. Now let's name this base, or better yet, box. So now that we have our box, we can get another cylinder and make the top of it. So let's get a cylinder. It's way too tall, so let's make this much smaller. Let's try 5. Let's leave the radius at 50. We need it to be about the same size. Let's increase the segments, because you see it has less definition than the box. Now it matches. So because this is not editable yet, we're going to go ahead and go to caps. We're going to increase the segments to match the beveling that we did on the other part, and we're going to turn on fillet. Fillet, bevel, more or less does the exact same thing. I'm going to reduce, oh, whoops, these are the wrong segments. We can leave that at 1. This is the one I want to change to 3. And the radius, I believe we did 0.5. So now we have the exact same curvature on the top that we have on the bottom. The only other thing that I want to do to this is I want to select this bottom and extrude it down so that it kind of locks in place and doesn't just slide around. So with this cylinder selected, we hit the letter C to make it editable again. Make sure your face mode is selected, and you can either use the live selection tool to select all of those, or UL to get the loop selection, and then you get all of them at the same time. So remember that when we extruded in on this part, we did 2.5. Now we already did a rounding of 0.5, so now we need to do a, sorry about that, we need to do an extrude inner of 2 centimeters in order to match the other part. Let's do 2.25 just to be on the safe side. So we'll hit the letter I for extrude inner. We'll do 2.25. You can also do this manually by just clicking and dragging, but I want to just get you as close to what we need as possible without any guesswork. So another thing you could have done was just clicked and dragged, but for this we're just going to do it this way. Hit the letter D for your extrude tool and click and drag to the right to make this part come down. So now if this part were sitting on top of this, it wouldn't slide off the top and it would lock in place like a box should. The only other part that we want to add is, let's go to the model mode, and now we can push it down into position. The next part that we want to do is just add a handle up here, because right now it's kind of awkward to have to wrap your hand around the entire thing to open it. So I want to add a little handle up here. Let's go back to our Faces tool, UL for a loop selection, select this part, and rather than keying in numbers, I'm now just going to do it by eyeballing it. So we're going to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. If you run out of screen space, you can let go and then switch over to the scale tool, and you can keep scaling those faces down. So that's what we want. We just want a really small part here, and then hit the letter D to extrude out. And now hit the letter T or grab the scale tool to scale up. Hit the letter D again to extrude upwards. And now we've got a little handle. The problem is that it's very sharp. So let's get the line tool again. Hit the letters UL for a loop selection and grab that edge. Hit MS for bevel, and we already have the 0.5 and the 3 subdivisions from our previous use of the tool, so we can just hit the apply button. And now we've got a top and a handle. One last thing I think I want to do is maybe bevel this edge out a little. So let's select this ring, hit MS again, and 0.5 is probably too much for that bottom part, so let's do 0.25. Whoops, 0.25, and hit apply. And there we go. If you zoom out a little, hit Command R, there's our box. Later on we'll come back to this model and we'll add a texture. For now, just do Command S give it a name, and save it, and we'll come back to it shortly. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye.